ท่านต่อไปนะครับจะเป็นเรื่องฟาร์มกังหันลมนอกชายฝั่งกับสิ่งแวดล้อมสังคมและความหลากหลายทางชีวภาพนะครับขอตบมือต้อนรับทาง ERM หน่อยครับ
สวัสดีครับผมพูดภาษาไทยนิดหน่อยครับ but I think it's better if I take this in English so for a mutual understanding. So my name is Michele. I'm from ERM and I'm based here in Bangkok. And today I will talk about environmental and social constraints that are usually encountered with offshore wind farm development. As soon as the presentation is on, I will start. Okay. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know who ERM is, it's the largest sustainability pure play consultancy company. We have a focus on sustainability and therefore all these issues related with environment, social aspects, health and safety. We do mergers and acquisition. We do sustainability strategies for big companies. We have offices around the world. And in Southeast Asia, we have an office in Thailand, which is the biggest one among the Southeast Asian countries. And we are kind of the hub of Southeast Asia. But we have also presence in Singapore, in Vietnam, in Indonesia. We don't have an office in the Philippines, but we are following project there. So before relocating to ERM Thailand, I was working in South Korea. I've been working there 3 years, following up the early stage of the offshore wind farm development. And so today I will start with a quick, brief introduction on the market trend, and then go through specific issues related with project financing and environmental impact assessment. So as you can see here, the concentration of the operation and plan offshore wind farms are in North Europe, and in Asia, if we exclude China, the main presence is in Japan, South Korea, and Vietnam. This means that a lot of experience that we accumulated in the market is coming from countries that are quite different from the Philippines or Thailand, and the lesson learned may be applicable, but we will face different challenges, especially with different species of animals, presence of indigenous people, different weather conditions. So we can learn something from the other countries, but we will face country-specific challenges. And as you can see in Europe, the operational capacity is dominated by the UK and Germany. And as you can see, the trend globally is towards the technology of fixed bottom compared to floating. As you can see, the operation floating capacity is very minimal, and this will probably stay for the next decade. And in Asia Pacific, the big boom is expected after 2028, and then that will continue until 2035. So again, this is a figure to show that in the lesson learned that we may have from other countries may not be applicable, but more investment will come in Asia Pacific, the market will grow, and then we will have our own experience and attraction of international financing as well. This data that I show is available online on our platform that provides market intelligence on the global trend of offshore wind, dedicated to offshore wind. So project financing, I want to focus on that because it's specifically related with the constraint. So that is the early stage phase of the development, when you will start looking at potential feasibility of the project, the best location for the wind farm, and then start approaching the financing structure. And when you approach the lenders, you will need to demonstrate that your project is feasible from a technical point of view, from an economic point of view, but also that doesn't come with a series of risks associated with environment and social that may delay the process or may generate some protest from the public, and that become a stranded asset for the banks. So what the banks do is joining some system of assessing the risk for their investment. I don't know if you ever heard about the Equator Principles. In Thailand, the Siam Commercial Bank is one of the signatories of these principles. And as you can see in the slide, this principle highlight different potential, let's say, risks and protocols and procedures that a company, a developer should put in place in order to demonstrate that the risk for the bank is lower. So when a bank like Siam Commercial Bank, when a developer goes to Siam Commercial Bank and asks for financing, this is requested to prepare a document called environmental impact assessment. There is the local environmental impact assessment that is submitted to the government in order to obtain the environmental permits, and there is the international environmental impact assessment, which is submitted to the bank in order to demonstrate the risk level. And when a bank is signatory of the Equator Principles, will be asked to comply with these International Finance Corporation standards. As you can see, this figure will help you understanding what is the focus of the bank when looking at your project, at the location of your project in terms of risk. So if we go together through the 8 principles of the 8 performance standard of IFC, you see that first one is risk management. So it's demonstrating to the bank that you have a good organization internally with roles and responsibility, and you are able to manage the risk appropriately. Then the second is labor. So this is another component showing that you have all the policies in place, all the contractual arrangements in place. And then resource efficiency. This is how you reduce pollution and emission levels of your project. Community, how you engage the communities, how you got their feedback, and how are the communities on board with the project. Land resettlement, this is not strictly applicable to offshore, but economic displacement of fishermen are also falling under this principle. And then biodiversity, so what is your impact on the species and the ecosystems in the area, and how you mitigate or compensate the damage to the ecosystem. And then again, indigenous people. This is mostly applicable to countries in Southeast Asia, where some fishing communities may be qualified as indigenous people as well. And then the last one is cultural heritage. As you can see, different banks may have different safeguards. All of them have established this safeguard to reduce their risk in their investment. They will go to their board when you will present your case for the investment, and they will discuss the risk and present the risk associated to your project. So again, the Asian Development Bank have their own set of standards, but they recently updated so that they are mostly aligned with the International Finance Corporation. And as you can see here, 2 extra with climate change and stakeholder engagement to show the commitment of the bank towards those 2 potential risks. So now moving from this concept of showing how you manage your risk associated to your project, I would like to take a few key potential risks that I've experienced and then other projects have experienced during their preparation of the environmental impact assessment. And namely, I will go with a few examples on the environment and then on the biodiversity and the social. So starting from the environmental challenge, one of the main issues is the water quality. As most of the construction is happening offshore and some part of the construction near shore, for example, the connection of the export cable to the landfall, that depending on the project and depending on the seabed condition may require different techniques. So for example, there may be required trenching in some areas, and if the sediment is too fine, there is suspension of the sediment will be high and then will generate a plume, and then this plume will damage the ecosystem in the vicinity of the landfall, for example. Also, the onshore component, the landfall point and the connection to your onshore substation, especially in Southeast Asia, along the coast you may encounter mangroves or you may encounter corals or seagrass, and those are quite important ecosystems. it means that if you decide to go through those ecosystems, you need to have a strong rationale to the banks and saying there was no other alternative, there was no other better alternative. So it's not purely an economic decision, it was the cheapest option, but you need to demonstrate that I looked at different alternatives and this is the one that has the lowest impact and the lowest effect on potential natural habitat. And then, of course, when you mobilize a vessel for the installation or for the transportation, you will generate some level of waste. It could be ballast water, or it could be the presence of the workers on the vessel for several months in the sea, and this may generate additional waste on top of the construction waste. And then, of course, this risk can be managed, can be assessed at early stage with modeling of sediment dispersion, but also using standard international practice like the MARPOL guidelines, you can also minimize, and you have a demonstration that you are handling the waste from your construction activity under control and then following international practice. When it comes to biodiversity, one of the most obvious issue is the generation of noise. This is more with the fixed bottom technology because it requires piling, and of course piling may have different energy requests, because when piling in a hard substrate you need more energy, and more energy will generate more noise, and the noise propagates through the water but also through the sediment, and that shock wave may damage marine mammals in different ways. So the most obvious one, if the marine mammals is, so when I say marine mammals, I refer to dolphins and whales and other cetaceans, and those will get, if they are too close, they will get a permanent damage, meaning that you compromise their auditory system. If they are at certain distances from the piling, they may have a temporary damage, meaning that for a period of time they will not have a full capacity of communication and auditory system, but over the time they will recover that. Otherwise, you have also other two potential effects. So the behavioral effect, meaning that you generate noise in an area, and that may scare or may prevent this animal to get and approach to that area. And that area, if it is a foraging ground, for example, seagrass for dugong, may prevent them from foraging or may affect their movement along the coast. Or masking and acoustic habitat impact. So marine mammals need to communicate through sounds over long distances. And if your project is generating a continuous sound in a specific location, they may not be able to communicate. And they need communication in order to hunt the fish or to direct each other during migration. So you may have, for example, individuals that lose communication with their group and then get stranded or enter areas that were not supposed to go. So the typical mitigation here are again established already from a technological point of view. From the lowest one will be acoustic deterrent. Before starting piling, you deter the animal from entering your area. And then you have marine mammals expert on the vessel that can spot whether the marine mammal is approaching towards your direction and not changing direction. In that case, you postpone the start of the piling. Or there are other technologies like the bubble curtain. You create a bubble around your piling, around your foundation that soften the distribution of sound, penetration of sound in the water column. Or this hydro sound damper, again another technology that is surrounding the foundation and reduce the sound. Yeah, this is the main related to underwater noise. Now let me move to birds and bats. So when we think about bird and bat impact from wind farm, the first thing that we think is about collision with the blades. So the birds being struck by the blades. But it's not always the case. So I wanted to show you a couple of examples for offshore wind that are not related to collision. So this company, Spur, has established cameras on this test of floating offshore farms outside the coast of Norway, and have recorded all the birds that were crossing the wind farm over 2 years. And they have recorded approximately 21,000 birds over 2 years, and then 2,600 at collision detection. But they found no collision. This is because the birds understand the presence of wind farm, can avoid them, but of course this is a very specific case in Norway and is not applicable for the rest of the world. Of course, it's a good point of start, a good evidence, and we need more research of this type in Southeast Asia to understand what is the interaction with our type of birds with the nearshore and offshore wind farms. This is another case from South Korea and China. So as you can see here, this species, which is called black-faced spoonbill, is an endangered species. And this species spends the summer in South Korea, and then during the winter it migrates to the south. It goes to China and then down to Taiwan and Vietnam. They tracked a couple of individuals of this bird, and they've noticed that this specific individual started the migration at the beginning of November. He crossed the sea between South Korea and China. It took for him around 10 hours to arrive without any possibility for foraging or restoring his energy. It arrived and encountered a series of clusters of offshore wind farms. At some point, he decided, probably because scared or without understanding what was going on the coast. It was his first migratory season. He was 1 year old, and he went to the north. Here, he started circling around this wind farm for 1 hour. At that time, probably there was an installation vessel that maybe confused this bird. And then rather than continuing and bypassing this wind farm and going to the coast, he decided to go all the way back during the night and with adverse conditions. So he survived going back to South Korea, and then he decided not to try to cross for the migration again. He spent there the winter, and then they found it during the winter dead. So of course, this bird spent a lot of energies and went back to an environment that wasn't suitable during the winter. And so, even if not direct collision, and even if not the effect of one specific wind farm, when planning offshore a cluster of offshore wind farms, we need to take into consideration the cumulative impact, which means that it's not only one single project effect, but creating a mega offshore wind farms may generate impact that are not visible at a single scale project, at a project scale. Yeah, and then another potential impact that I experienced in South Korea is that, of course, installing wind farms in the sea means that you need to create an offset area where the fishermen cannot enter because of safety reasons and also during the construction and so on. So the first approach that you would think is that if I install the wind farm offshore, far offshore, I will get consultation with all the fishing cooperatives that have that specific type of gear and specific type of boat that allow them to fish far offshore. However, what the case was is that also the nearshore fishermen started to complain because they claimed that the occupation of this far offshore portion of the sea would push the fishermen to fish in the nearshore area, therefore overall reducing their capacity and their catch yield. And therefore they were claiming that they were entitled to compensation as well. And of course, when you have organized society with strong fishing cooperatives, with good local connection with the mayor and the local political authorities, they can have a strong push against the project. Yeah, so again, as we have seen from these examples, those are just a few of the impacts that we may understand, and this is our one of the key aspects that the lenders, the financing group will have and will try to understand from your project. So as you have seen, the 8 IFC performance standards, some that are potentially critical for Southeast Asia will be the presence of unique critical habitats, so like mangroves or a stopover for migratory birds and so on, presence of indigenous people, especially among fishing communities, and then loss of livelihood of people already below the poverty line that rely purely on the income generated by fishing, and then the cumulative impact as well. And so again, this is the typical mitigation hierarchy that you would apply in order to mitigate your risk and your impact. So the first, you will try to avoid this impact from the source by selecting a proper technology or a proper location where you have you can avoid those impacts. And then you can reduce your noise generation, for example, or you can abate at receptors. So working with the fishermen in order to find alternative livelihoods so that they are not impoverished by the presence of the wind farm. And then, of course, if you cannot do these 3, then you would need to remediate the impacts that you cause on the environment or generating some offset. If you need to cross a seagrass or a coral, you can then work with NGOs in order to re-establish additional coral reef around the landfall and project area. Yeah, so this is the end of my presentation. And again, I would like to stress the fact that a lot of implementation that you can do at the design stage will save significant amount of money downstream, because during your plan you can still select a different route or a different landfall for your cables, a different distribution of the turbine, different density, and that will prevent a lot of potential impact that you can have downstream. And then if you need to mitigate later by installing more expensive equipment or having a more thorough environmental baseline data collection, then it will cost much more later on during the project. Yeah, I hope this was useful, and then if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them in English or Thai, and someone will help me translating. Thank you.
ท่านไหนมีคำถามไหมครับเรายังมีเวลาสัก1 คำถาม 2 คำถาม ใครมีคำถามไหมครับ
Hello, thank you for your presentation. And this is relevant to markets wherein the developers are starting to engage with the local community, such as the Philippines. And I think the whole idea of engaging with the fisher folks deeply resonate with the stakeholders in the Philippines. And there are questions surrounding possible models of them owning. There's pathways for them to own some sense of ownership of the project. We've seen the latest report from World Bank on community benefit sharing, and whilst they have identified compensation as a key to continue engaging with the community, for them it's more of having a longer commitment and engagement with the communities because the asset will stay there for the next 20 years or so. So maybe the question there is, have you seen or do you know of any ownership option wherein the community will be much more involved with the project? And if yes, have we seen this done successfully or maybe not yet, still in the concept stage? Curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, excellent question. So yeah, in the Philippines, the the situation is also even tougher because, to my understand, the fishermen can only fish within their municipalities, and they have very specific lines of where the municipality water ends, and there is only so much you can do in order to give them a different alternative ground. And so, and the situation is even exacerbated in some areas that I visited because there are development for tourism that are occupying coastline where they're used to put their boats, and now they are even farther from the fishing ground. They are spending more money for fuels and so on. So having the ownership or part of the ownership of the wind farm is an excellent idea. And in Southeast Asia, I haven't seen this method applied yet. But in Denmark, I lived there 5 years, and there was one project on a specific island. So the number of people living in this island was restricted, and so they could aggregate together. And an excellent project manager managed to talk and have that ground level talk with all the residents of these islands in order to bring them on board of the offshore wind farm that they were installing on the coast of this island. And they managed to create like a sort of cooperatives with different level of shares. And so according to the shares of each one that wanted to contribute and buy some share of the project, they could also get the benefit of the electricity generation and then get a compensation or a revenue out of that project. So it's not out of the world, it happened before, but of course it requires a strong community, a strong engagement over different levels.
มีคำถามเพิ่มเติมไหมครับ ถ้าไม่มีเนี่ยจะขอข้ามไปหัวข้อถัดไปแล้วกันยังไงรบกวนตบมืออีกครั้งหนึ่งให้วิทยากรด้วยนะครับ